Well, the trip to Oregon ended predictably, so why is everybody still talking about it? You know we are. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the sports section right here on WUSB Stony Brook, Long Island's longest-running sports call-in program, but during COVID, of course, the callers are the hosts. I'm Matt Mankiewich. I'm joined by Ken Fermin and Zach Wilson, as usual. Jake Myhre joining us for the first time. But we'll be on for 2 hours until midnight talking about Stony Brook sports and everything else going on in the world of sports. And for once, Stony Brook sports is a big part of everything else going on in the world of sports. Guys, the Seawolves football team made a trip to Oregon yesterday, and they went up against the highest-ranked team the program has ever faced, and failed to do one thing, and it wasn't win. They failed to embarrass themselves. They made a good impression on everyone. A team that might have been in over its head, but didn't get run off the field so much, maybe towards the end a little bit. But the guys can go out there with their heads held high against the University of Oregon, number 4 team in the nation. And Oregon, they did what they had to do. To maintain that number 4, they had to stomp on Stony Brook. They didn't stomp on them as much as they would have liked, but they did their job. So, guys, your impressions of this trip out to the West Coast, this historical trip out to the West Coast, because not only did the Seagulls face the highest-ranked team they've ever faced, but probably got national attention, particularly on social media, unprecedented since the 2012 College World Series run.
Well, Matt, I'm sure that is really a good fact right there to talk about how Stony Brook has put up that type of media attention in a sport since 2012, but don't forget about 2017, and that was the first time Stony Brook played against an FBS-ranked team, and that game ended a lot more closer than the football team played against Oregon yesterday. If you recall, in 2017,
yeah, but this was Power Conference.
Yeah, if you recall, Stony Brook began their season in 2017 against South Florida, a team that is not part of a Power 5 conference. Used to be good just a few years ago before they started to pretty much fall off that conference contender in any way. But that game started off with a blocked punt that was recovered in the end zone by a former Seawolf, Augie Contressa. Stony Brook was up 10-7 at halftime, but then the second half started to give South Florida and the former quarterback Quentin Flowers a push. But the game was tight entering the fourth quarter. And eventually, the Bulls had to come away and finish it off. They did, but they only won 31-14. They were ranked number 19 that week, and because they just barely defeated Stony Brook like that, they dropped 3 spots down to number 22. So believe it or not, Stony Brook's track record in their early history against FBS-ranked teams is not as dreadful as people would assume of an FCS team that is currently not ranked in any way this season against a team that is
we haven't
really
played that
good
many ranked teams. We haven't played that many ranked teams, so it's not a big statistical sample, let's be honest. But, yes, in our own historical context, that was a great game. Even though the Seawolves obviously didn't win, they did, again, acquit themselves very well against a supposedly superior opponent. But this is on a level, and Spencer Ross responded to a Facebook posting of mine illustrating it. Autzen Stadium at the University of Oregon holds 54,000 people, and it was mostly full. Stony Brook's Laval Stadium holds 10. So essentially what you're looking at is a year's full of sellouts in one game. And you can also say, I don't know because I'm not sure, because, again, we've played big-name schools before. that might have been the largest crowd that's ever seen a Stony Brook football game. It's definitely the largest television audience that's ever seen a Stony Brook football game.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah, I mean, Stony Brook getting all of that attention, who knows what this could do for them in the future. And they haven't, and just as you said, Matt, this is like an early history of Stony Brook playing against FBS-ranked teams. And their conference, who they just joined about 8 years ago, has had a lot more experience playing against those types of FBS-ranked teams. There was a time, I believe it was 2010, when James Madison upset Virginia Tech when they were ranked. Pulling that off, CAA is a really great conference in the FCS. And
it is a very good FCS conference.
In that than everyone else.
But you saw the tweets.
Stony Brook managed to stay tight in this contest. And that's despite, again, being the underdogs, not having the same level of competition and talent on their squad as Oregon, but they were still able to keep it a 3-point game up until early in the second quarter. And that's one of the reasons why you saw them trending on social media, is the fact that the first 3-ish minutes of the game, they weren't necessarily out of it. They still had a shot, despite at Tycho Fields throwing it in the third play of the game, and the Seals trailing down by 10. They did match the Ducks in the run department. They had about 25 less rushing yards, but they were still able to get over 130 yards on the ground. So that impressed me. But obviously it was Oregon, all the way, and they managed, especially in the second half, to just dominate against the best Stony Brook had to offer. And just incredible. So hats off to it.
So, the Seawolves make, what was it, $650,000, something in that neighborhood, $250,000.
I'd say about $625,000. I believe that was the estimate.
So
of what they were paid to do.
No injuries reported, which is good. Which is again, what's that?
That was their biggest win, I thought.
Yes.
The two biggest wins for them is A, they covered the spread by 1 point, and B, no one got out of there injured.
Yeah, 48-7 was 48. Yeah, 48-7, 41 point. There was a 42-point spread, so they covered. So if you, in the words of the immortal Warner Wolf, if you took the Seawolves at 42, you won.
Hallelujah!
Yeah.
Really, who would have done?
I don't know.
Who was really thinking about that?
I certainly wasn't. I thought for sure they would have given up 60 to a fourth-ranked team. That's honestly what impressed me. They held the Ducks to 3 on 10 in terms of third down. Tyson Lawton, after a group, he had a good game for his standards, averaging 5 yards a carry. But Jaden Cook as well for a couple plays. So, in that front, it was nice to see some new faces for both the Ducks and the Eagles.
So, that game's out of the way. Now we have to turn the page because the conference schedule, of course, is looming very quickly for this team. And still a couple of weeks off, though, because they will be facing Fordham at home. This would be a nice bounce-back game. This is a team that they have a good history with, even though they've only faced each other a couple of times in the past 30 years. But they do have an opportunity here to boost their record before it gets really tough. Because you got Rhode Island and Towson on the road, and then Delaware, and then Richmond. That's a gauntlet. And then you got to go to Maine, then Villanova. That can, and Albany. That fills out your schedule. But the whole point is that CAA schedule is going to be tough. You saw what those teams did over the weekend against non-conference opponents. You saw Villanova beat Richmond barely. And I'm going to call up the rest of them because, of course, to boost their RPI, not that it really matters much, in the FBS. Your conference record really matters much more. You have to win your conference. Syracuse got stomped by Albany, 62-24. Maine just got by Merrimack. New Hampshire just edged Lafayette on the road. Rhode Island really beat up on Brown, 45-24. William and Mary did the same thing to Colgate that Stony Brook did the week before, beat them on the road 27-7. Rutgers got stomped on by Delaware. Appalachian State did a job on Elon, and Townsend got beat up on by North Dakota State by a score of 35-7. But James Madison beat Weber State 37-24. That rounds out your CAA for the week. But it doesn't get any easier for the Seawolves. So you might have learned a thing or two. Good learning experience going up against a team. Like I said, when NFL rookies talked about the difference between college and NFL football, they always say the speed. I hope you guys get a chance to talk to the guys during the week and ask them how it felt playing against a team on that level where these guys are literally one step from the NFL. Because Oregon does send guys to the pros, not just NFL, but CFL as well. So lots of pros, potential pros that they're going up against.
Yeah, I'm sure that we're really going to want to hear how they feel that it could help them with the experience that they just gained out of a team that could really have a legitimate chance to go right to the college football playoffs. Never has really played a team that has really been there before, so this could be something new. And if Oregon does go to the college football playoffs, they may as well remember that one of the games that they played was against Stony Brook that really made it look tough for them in the first half to begin with.
Well, I'll tell you something. The new AP poll came out. Oregon moved up one. They're now at 3.
Well, Oklahoma was at 3 to enter yesterday, but it looks like they've lost a spot because their win was pretty close against Nebraska, and we will be talking about that just very shortly. But even with Oregon getting that type of victory, like just averaging about the way people would have expected it, seems like Oklahoma's 7-point win was apparently it wasn't as convincing as Oregon's win over Stony Brook, which is really, really odd because you gotta consider Oklahoma and Nebraska's rivalry dating back to 1971, dubbed the game of the century back then, when both those teams were big powerhouses in that year.
Further back than that. But yes, that does look a little unfair if you're an Oklahoma fan, because Oregon beat up on an FCS team like it was supposed to, and Oklahoma's going up against its biggest rival, and they pull it out, and they go down? Nah, they're not happy in Norman tonight. Dropping a spot just because they played a close game against their number one rival while Oregon rolls over a team they're supposed to roll over. Makes no sense.
Is it this Oklahoma team doesn't have enough to think about with going to the SEC in just a matter of years?
And that's another can of worms.
Just on that game in particular, though, in a sense, I can understand it just because we're talking about the spread earlier. But, by all accounts, it probably should have been a through and through dominated game by the Sooners. They, especially looking at them at the start of the season, everyone had predicted, myself included, them to have a really impressive offense. And, Nebraska, they gave 30 points to Illinois in the opener. They managed to hold the Sooners just 23 points, despite giving up over 400 yards. And for an offense which is run under Lincoln Riley, who usually has a top 5 offense year in, year out in college football, to me, this offense has really not looked as impressive as it has in the past. And Jake, I know you watched this one closely too. And you're talking about the spread. It probably should have been an Oklahoma blowout. And I think a lot of people, myself included, were shocked that it was really tight till the very end.
Yeah, so I just want to point out one more thing quickly. As we're about to now get into college football, we may as well go through the rest of the top 10 that's new, that just came out earlier today at 2 p.m. So, number 1 is Alabama. Once again, always been that theme for so many years. just being able to barely take down Florida 31-29 in the Swamp. Then you get number 2, Georgia. Once again, they're number 2 in the nation after getting a dominating 40-13 win against their SEC rival, South Carolina, who was also undefeated 2-0 entering last night's game in Athens. Number 3, we already touched on Oregon coming off of their win against Stony Brook, of course. Number 4, Oklahoma. Just also talked about that one, coming off their 7-point close win against their rival Nebraska. Now you get number 5, Iowa, who remains at number 5 in the nation once again after defeating Kent State 30-7. At number 6, you get the Penn State Nittany Lions continuing to crawl up both in the polls and in the Big Ten after they played under the lights in Happy Valley last night, a whiteout, sold-out crowd against the Auburn Tigers. A really great game to watch, and Penn State performed admirably, 28-20. Then you get number 7, Texas A&M. The freshman quarterback Zach Caldaza and the Aggies' defense under Jimbo Fisher continues to once again give Texas A&M an impressive start to the season. Then you get number 8, Cincinnati, hanging around that top 10 look for just about a year now. They're coming off of a 14-point win against Indiana that was pretty much a nail-biter throughout most of the game, but then 15 unanswered in the fourth quarter allowed the Bearcats to seal the deal against Michael Penix. Then you get number 9, Clemson. They did defeat Georgia Tech to begin ACC play 14, but it was only a 6-point win. This offensive start for the Tigers have not been promising ever since Trevor Lawrence left for the NFL. Then last but not least, you get number 10, Ohio State, who's coming off of a 41-20 victory against Tulsa. They were ranked 9th last week, but now they're ranked 10th this week. And there's going to be still a lot of questions about whether or not C.J. Stroud will try and keep that Big Ten title contention for Ohio State, with a lot of more Big Ten teams rising up in the conference. So, as we finish up that top 10, let's start off with one of the best games to watch yesterday, and that was the first one I touched up on, Alabama and Florida. The fact is, last time Alabama was in a close game against a team, it was against the Florida Gators back last year in the SEC championship game when Kyle Trask was still part of Florida. And even though this was a lot more closer this time, I mean, what Alabama had to deal with this time as opposed to last time was that it was a true home crowd. They were on the road, and they had a great start, but then lacking offense for a little while, just only 10 total in the second half after putting up 3 touchdowns in the first half. So we know, so this may prove to be that this may be a year that may not be as strong as it was last year when they were undefeated going 13-0, but I'll get Ken and Jake probably in on this now. So since it does look like there may be a vulnerability in Alabama, what does this say about everybody else's chances this season?
Well, I guess I would say that Alabama definitely looked a little mortal. They look like they can be, tested. But I would say that Bryce Young still played a really smart, really good game overall in a hostile environment. They came out strong, and the run game wasn't as good as, maybe he's used to, or, the Alabama fans and team is used to down there in the Swamp. So he played a really smart, and, he didn't turn the ball over, and, they relied on that early lead, and they didn't have to, do anything crazy to really win, but, they still played smart enough to get the W.
And you really need to give all of that credit to Florida for just really showing off that dominance. I mean, this is a season where there's going to be a lot of questions about what it would look like for this team overall without Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts. But you get other players that have really started to shine out. You get Emory Jones, who was the backup quarterback last year for Kyle Trask. And everything else just seemed to be very surprising, to say the least. Alabama, they were a better favorites in this game. They were a 13.5-point favorite. They only managed to win by 2. Emory Jones just looking like quite the dual threat quarterback that we've seen from players like Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson in the NFL. And then you get this Malik Davis guy, the running back for Florida, who wasn't that bad. 96 yards and a touchdown. That's not too much of action for Emory Jones with the passing game, but he was just getting all shifty. Running the ball 19 times that led to 80 yards and a score. Florida did not lose their ranking. They were ranked 11th to begin, and they just still stayed that way because when you take it down to the wire against one of the best teams in the nation, you don't deserve to lose that ranking. You only deserve to go up, and that is evidence of what Stony Brook did in 2019 when they forced overtime against number 2 James Madison. They were ranked 24th, and they ended up, and Stony Brook, despite that loss, ended up moving 2 spots. So sometimes there are these types of teams that could have that vulnerability, and so that could really lead to other teams thinking that they could even have a chance, and they're not wrong to think that.
Yeah, and if you notice, Zach, Florida actually kept their ranking right there at 11 in the updated polls, and I think they deserve it. In fact, I think they could have maybe even had a chance to crack the top 10, with Ohio State losing last week to Oregon at home. And then, they had a nice performance this week. But, Florida comes in and they give Alabama a run for their money, especially going down big early. They really gave them all that they could. And, who's to say they don't meet again later on and maybe they don't give up, as big of get down big early, and instead of a 2-point loss, maybe it's a couple point win.
Yeah, I'm sure that Florida once again has the ability to contend for that division of the SEC West Division title this year. They were able to take that after they got that big win in Jacksonville against the Georgia Bulldogs, and it looks like if they're going to once again try and get back to the SEC championship game, they're going to have to once again find a way to get past Georgia. It was kind of tough last year. They did defeat them 44-28. But I got a feeling that for Florida, the rest of their schedule, besides Kentucky and LSU, there doesn't really seem to be anybody else that could be a true threat to Florida probably staying within that top 10, maybe getting a great bowl game, or even be the underdog to try and still make a contention for the college football playoffs. They do take on the Georgia Bulldogs on Saturday, October 30th at 3:30 p.m. on CBS. No doubt that probably is going to be a really great game to watch that week in college football.
Well, it'll be a great opportunity to move up the list a little bit because naturally, if you knock off what the team is currently number 2 and you're number 11, you're going to move up. But the most important thing here is that Florida puts itself in position to possibly knock off Georgia in the SEC championship. And that will punch your ticket to the playoff more than anything else.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. So, Alabama and Florida, they go their separate ways. The Gators will host Tennessee next week. While for Alabama, in 2 weeks, they're going to be taking on Ole Miss, who's been looking pretty strong. But before that, Crimson Tide will be having one more non-conference game to play this season, and actually won't be their last one. Their last one will be Saturday, November 13th against New Mexico State. Their second to last next week, it will be against Southern Mississippi from the Conference USA, and I'm pretty sure everybody can agree that Alabama is going to be heavily dominating that game from start to finish. Touchdown probably on the first play, no doubt on the first drive. So, the SEC, they're going to be expecting 2 new members, Oklahoma and Texas, coming to them in a matter of years. So, now that we touched base on Alabama and Florida, let's move on to the next one. Talking about Clemson and Georgia Tech. Talked about Clemson before. They were still in the top 10 today, despite that rough-looking win against Georgia Tech, 14-8. To begin this season, Clemson really has seemed to have suffered the loss of Trevor Lawrence, despite gaining back Justin Ross after he suffered that spinal injury before the season began last year. They are relying on a new running back in Will Shipley, But DJ, after he got a few starts for Trevor Lawrence last year, due to Trevor Lawrence having COVID, especially in that Notre Dame game, which was huge, DJ doesn't really have seemed to gel with the offense yet. He's having some troubles, and what do you guys think is causing that to be the case?
Well, I'll tell you what, Zach. I think, you said it best. We all saw DJ come out last season, that game against Notre Dame, and we all thought Clemson was in good hands, knowing that, Trevor Lawrence was making his way into the draft, into the pros. And so far this year, he's been, I would say, pretty underwhelming. This is a game, you think Clemson at home against Georgia Tech, this should be, a big win for them, kind of maybe even run them out of the building. And, they're in a close game late. And, you look up, that Clemson defense is still pretty good. But, like you said, the offense isn't gelling. And, Dabo Swinney definitely has some work on his hands before they get later in the season to try to find themselves back into the playoff.
Absolutely. And again, looking at this game, just previewing it, you asked me what the final score is, and I'm thinking Clemson has at least 3 touchdowns up on Georgia Tech. But that Clemson offense is silent. And it's really been like that since the beginning of the season. It has played out of this world. The ground game really is not too bright either. They faced 2 FBS foes, and they got a pair of touchdowns combined in those games. It's different when you're playing a flat opponent and a team like Georgia. So this Clemson team does not look pretty. And if they want to stay atop the rankings, want to stay high in that AP poll, they really got to come out, guns blazing. And that offense especially really has to light it up, because they've fallen every week since the opening one when this poll has been released. And honestly, they have not shown many, myself included, that it's going to go up from here. I don't think Clemson's coming out of the top 25, but I don't see them being a top 4 team if this is the level they're going to be playing the entire season.
Well, the ACC really has looked pretty iffy to begin this year. North Carolina was ranked 10th to begin the season, but then they suffered a 7-point upset loss at Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech yesterday just getting upset by West Virginia. There's really no telling to how the ACC seems to have taken a bit of a downwind in the most recent years.
Yeah.
Clemson was dominant in the ACC, and before them, it was Florida State.
Right. And Syracuse looked like the best team out of the ACC, and that's because they're facing a CAA team in the Great Danes, and they mopped the floor with them 62-24. But even then,
we do thank Syracuse for that. We do thank, as Stony Brook supporters, we do thank Syracuse for humiliating our Empire rival. Of course, you'd be surprised about how Empire rivals may find their way onto Long Island.
Yeah, but at the same time, too, Clemson still, Syracuse might be up there, but, just looking at these teams, Clemson's still probably the top spot in the ACC, but, as you said, Virginia Tech could be a surprise to really make a run for that top spot. North Carolina State, maybe, possibly. No, probably not, but it is always a possibility. I'm also sure Florida State has gotten, because they were always a dominant team, especially these seasons.
Again, it's not only that too, Ken, but Clemson, you look at their schedule the rest of the way, there's no big, huge games.
Great point.
Really on there for them to, even have a big win to their resume. We just went through the ACC. Pittsburgh looked like they might have been, a decent team. They come off a bad loss at home. Florida State is not the Florida State that we're, maybe used to. We've just talked about Syracuse, but they're no great shakes either. So right now, Boston College is 3-0, but there's no powerhouses on this schedule where, they have a big win and they can move up a couple spots and maybe find themselves in that top 4. It's going to be really difficult for them moving forward, most likely.
Guys, if you take a look at the ESPN article that reports on the poll, and I believe that's from AP, but this is what really got my attention. 6 ranked teams lost yesterday, though none of them in the top 10. 19, the total number of ranked teams to lose through the first 3 weeks of the season. That's the most through 3 weeks of a season in the history of the poll. How do you like that? So, you got 10 ranked teams losing to other ranked teams. Okay, fine. One top 10 team has lost to an unranked team. North Carolina got beat by Virginia Tech in the first week, and they were ranked number 10. And other than that, it's been absolutely crazy. A top 10 ranking doesn't ensure anything. And even within the rankings, like we just said, Oregon beats the CAA team and moves up, and Oklahoma doesn't beat Nebraska badly enough and moves down. It really, it's one of the reasons why you can't take the polls too seriously. Coaches, as a rule, don't, because of the idiosyncrasies of what happens week by week. At the end of the season, everybody knows who's the best, or at least who's the hottest. So, I mean, we can talk about somebody moving up a couple of spots, somebody moving down, somebody dropping out completely. And at this early stage, it's become rather unpredictable. About the only thing that seems predictable right now is that Alabama's going to win next week. Doesn't matter who they're playing. But until somebody knocks them off the top of the hill, that's what we're going to be dealing with. So, guys, we also had some soccer action over at Stony Brook this past weekend. The women, they ended up with a big win on Friday. And what did they do today? Because they were supposed to take on UAlbany.
Which they also won.
Yeah, so they're doing pretty well right now. Let's talk a little bit about them, because we, of course, covered that game on Friday. We aired it. Couldn't have aired it. Actually, we could have aired it today, but we had other things going on. But taking a look right now at women's soccer, as we were saying, they won on Friday against Cornell, and that was on what they call in soccer a golden goal, and every other sport sudden death, 4-3, and then edging by Albany 2-1.
Yeah, and that you really saw the purpose of that stacked schedule that Coach Bischoff set for his club at the start of the season. You know, you ask why are they facing Hofstra's, why they're facing Providence, Colorado, you know, these big Power 5 teams, and Hofstra, a team that's usually ranked or on the bubble. The answer is because when you get into, you know, the later stages, really the meat of the season as well as conference season, it really retools your squad as a whole and shows you how not only the team can win, but the different types of opponents the Seawolves team can face, adjust to, and capitalize on in terms of creating scoring chances. Let's go back to that Friday game. That was a game where it was very silent to start off and incredibly explosive that second half. I mean, 5 goals in that second half and overtime period combined. It doesn't get more high drama than that. And for the Seawolves, they were behind a lot of that game, and they would have lost that game had it not been for about 30 seconds before, you know, the closest buzzer beater you could get in soccer, where Mary Brendan lined out a perfect shot 30 yards out and sent it over the keeper to tie the game up, like a minute after Cornell scored the go-ahead goal. So that was, I think, a tremendous showcase of this Seawolves offense. And for a team where, again, they couldn't get much done in the first half, they really got a lot done in the second, and they showed that with Alyssa Francis getting that game winner off the free kick from Kerry Pearson. So start off the overtime period. This is a team that they have so many different pieces, especially on the attack, they could turn to, and primarily Alyssa Francis. And they're able to really pull these close games out, I think, because of A, the tough schedule they set for themselves earlier, and B, just showing once they get the ball, not only on the attack, but in the box, they're going to find a way to score.
Especially the people who they're going to be facing next, because they're fully into the murky schedule now. All the remaining games are conference after this victory against Albany. They travel to Vermont and NJIT, who seems to be annoying everybody these days. Then home against New Hampshire. Then they alternate at Maine, home against Binghamton, at Hartford, home against UMass Lowell, at UMBC to round out their schedule. How do you like their chances as the murky schedule progresses?
You're coming in already the two-time champs, so you got that target on your back. So really, once you beat them, the Seawolves, you are going to be looked as a favorite. We saw that last season as the one team to defeat the Seawolves in the regular season. Albany ended up matching up with them in the finals where they fell. So for the Seawolves to win the rematch of that today in a 2-1 victory, despite getting outshot 28-10 and 14-4 shots on goal, really shows that this Seawolves team is no joke. If anything, I think to me, surprising, they look better than they did last year. I would not let the record fool you. Yeah, on paper, so far this season, they've allowed more goals than goals scored, but that to me doesn't say anything besides the level of competition they faced, because when they headed into conference play, I thought they did a great job really restricting the flow of attack Albany tried to have on their side, forcing them to take a lot of really ugly shots. And even, in the box, they showed that they got a great keeper in Emerson Burke, who really impressed me with getting 12 saves today, which is the most, I'm pretty sure, since Sophia Manor was a goalkeeper. So this Seawolves team, to me, you can pull out a lot of stops against them. It's going to take a lot to defeat them. Obviously, this Seawolves team is not going to get shut out, especially in conference play. It's going to take, honestly, 4 goals to defeat this Seawolves squad. And that, I don't even know, considering the Cornell game was pretty close. It was pretty close for them losing 3-2 up until that final score. This Seawolves team has been tremendous so far on this 3-game run. They've impressed me for sure. And again, going against teams like Vermont will be interesting because they got a great goal there too. Hartford as well in non-conference action, 16 goals to 3 goals surrendered. So they're definitely going to be one to watch this upcoming season.
Okay, so let's shift to the men because they were busy this week as well. Split, lost on the road to Ryder on Tuesday, and on Saturday started their America East season against Vermont at Laval and picked up a 2-0 win. So they're off to a good start.
And this was a team, again, highly underestimated, rightly so, because of their abysmal past couple seasons. A lot of questions. Who's going to step up? Who's going to take over? And I think we've really started to see who stepped up for the Seawolves team, especially on the men's side in conference play. Aki Slovason, we've been saying his name a lot this season. He began the scoring in the 38th minute off a great pass from Gabe Fernandez, who's another name we've been saying this season. And that was a cross-field pass. So a great clear from Gabe, finding Aki with some great footwork and was able to get a goal, being the keeper one-on-one. So I think the Seawolves finally establishing not only that playmaker, but also that goal scorer they've been desperately looking for over the past few seasons. Has been key to their success and their victories. And even then, the loss against Ryder, they held Ryder scoreless for the first 55 minutes. Their problem was they committed too many fouls. You had 23 fouls in 90 minutes, okay? You're averaging, one almost every other minute, every 2 minutes. It's too much. You're not going to get the ball that way. That's why they're held to about 6 shots that game. They did a lot better now in the most recent game, even when they allowed Vermont to take 17 shots, because like the women's squad, they really didn't allow too many good looks from Vermont. As with Edmund Kaiser, that he too has posted a clean sheet in conference play, third time this season. And this Eagles team, again, has looked so much more refined than in the past. And they're a team you definitely want to look out for. The top dog is still New Hampshire. They're the only team ranked right now in the American East. But with other squads like UMBC and NJIT showing they can score almost as well as New Hampshire, that's going to be the key for Stony Brook in the future, is just continuing to win these games 2-0, 3-1, 4-2, etc.
Well, soccer by its very nature is like that. You rarely see a blowout, really one-sided game. But they will, of course, take on Binghamton this coming Saturday at Binghamton up in Vestal. And then they get Hartford at home, at UMBC, at NJIT, then 2 at home with UMass Lowell and Yale, actually, a non-conference game that late in the season. And then they finish off their season at New Hampshire and home against Albany. So, down the stretch, now that they have a preseason under their belt, 5-2 record going in, getting their first win in conference, how do you like where they stand?
Oh, if I'm Coach Anatole, I am the happiest man on the island. Again, this was a team that did not have a pretty past couple of years, and a men's club that, with all due respect, was pegged by the conference to be the challengers for that ranked New Hampshire team. In light, we see Albany often chosen to be the challenger to dethrone Stony Brook's women's lacrosse incredible run as conference leaders. Stony Brook was chosen in that same light, and they've been unable to follow the successes they had from those 2016, 2017 seasons. Now it really looks like the team is going to be a top contender. Maybe not the top contender, but definitely top 3, top 4, which is going to be enough to get in the playoffs. This is a squad that, again, a lot of new prospects, even some that played last year, didn't really get a lot of chance to play because of the Eberge season. But again, a lot of new prospects, a lot of new faces, I think, really stepping up. And as something that was pointed out by Mike last week, and in his great preview article he wrote for the Statesman, you could just tell there's a different chemistry. There feels like there's an actual chemistry where it's not 11 guys on the pitch trying to play hero ball. These are guys who are playing team ball, looking for the next man who's open, and looking to set up their team to get a good shot or get a good defensive stop or help out their goalie in between net. This is the best I think I've seen this men's soccer team over the past 5 or 6 years. And that's not even counting the records. That's just them playing team ball as a whole.
Ken, Matt just kind of went over the schedule there upcoming for Stony Brook. How do you feel about their chances with some of their biggest, maybe their 4 biggest games the rest of the way on the road, with, starting with Binghamton next week, and then at UMBC, at NJIT later, and then again towards the end of the schedule at New Hampshire, maybe the biggest game of all?
You want at least a split, and you're not disappointed. You still, just in terms of adjusting to the conference play again, with all these new guys, you're looking at a split at least. This is a team that I think they match up well against Binghamton and Vermont. And this is a team that I think could beat Hartford, because as good as Hartford is in terms of shooting wise, they, I think, have a defense that they really need to work on in conference play. They've already given up 10 goals, only been able to score 4, despite taking a lot of high quality shots. So to me, this is a team that I think has to be built to really focus on the attack, because they do a great job on defense, and Edmund Kaiser in particular, great in between the pipes. But this is a team where I still want to see more on the attacking side. Really see some of these guys step up. We've seen Aki Soliksid, Jonas Bekas as well, have been 2 that have come to my mind. But I want to see the numbers. They got to find the back of the net more, I think, to really be at the top of this conference, have a shot to go all the way.
Okay. Now, there is one other sport we need to at least report on, and find out what they've been up to over the past few days since we last talked about them. And that would be St. John's and the volleyball team facing St. John's, I should say. They did lose 3-1 against them. But then this weekend in the Maryland tournament, they beat Columbia 3-1, lost to Maryland, which was a host, 3-0, and beat the Akron Zips by a score of 3-2. So non-conference setup there. America East kicks in this week. It starts for volleyball on Saturday at UMBC, and then they've got 3 road matches in a row. At UMBC, at Binghamton, at Albany, and that's compensated for by 3 home matches in a row. New Hampshire, NJIT, and Binghamton. And it seems like that's the way the schedule is configured. 2 on the road, 2 at home, 1 on the road, 1 at home. All throughout through the end of the season on November 12th, right, home against UMBC. But this is a team that is now 6-8 overall, but again, all non-conference. Really hard to tell what you have here because 0-3 away, 4-2 on neutral sites. You've seen them. What do you think is? How do they look going into this America East schedule, starting with UMBC on the road?
Yeah, again, you can't really let the road because Albany is 3 to the Jayhawks. So the records in non-conference play, to me, they don't matter as much, especially in a sport like volleyball, as we would compare it to maybe football or basketball. But at the same time, this non-conference slate has really been a standout, I think, showcase for several players, but Leonie Coons in particular. She's someone who I don't know if anyone had in terms of stepping up to be the lead role player and scorer for the Seawolves team, especially last year when it was Eni Omalewa and Amaya DeLong in particular who really carried the attack for Stony Brook. And they're still there. If you look at the percentages, they're still among the best 10, 15 team or players getting scores. But Leonie has just been phenomenal. I think she has incredible accuracy. And when she fires off a shot, it is so tough for the opposing team to get a hand on it. Or if they are getting a hand on it, they're not serving it back. They're sending it behind them. They're sending it to the ceiling. It is tough to receive and serve against her. She has played phenomenally, averaging about 3 kills a set, 155 in total, second best in the conference, right above teammate Amaya DeLong at 152. 2 of them make a great pair at the front row. And just Stony Brook in general, I think, have been the most impressive team, at least number-wise, in the conference, considering they lead virtually every stat, especially in the attack, in terms of kills, assists, scoring. This is a well-balanced team that I think does a lot of things pretty good. Maybe nothing to pull away. Kills, you could argue, pull away the rest of the pack. They have 90 more than New Hampshire at 665 to 575. But this is a team where they worked on their flaws from last season, which was struggles blocking. Scoring, I thought, was an issue. They lost a lot of games. And on top of that as well, just the defending-wise, you've been seeing Kiani Kerstetter step up once again in her libero spot, and she's about to set the all-time digs record in the next couple of games. So that's going to be fun to watch, especially in conference play, where it's still pretty open. Anyone, I think, can win it, but Stony Brook's got to be a favorite entering non-conference play, along with UAlbany and maybe even NJIT.
We pretty much rounded out Stony Brook sports for the first 53 minutes of the show, but one thing I do want to remind everyone is that we do have a football broadcast coming up this coming Saturday, and Zach will remind you at the end of the show once again. It will be the Fordham Rams, and it will be a 3:15 start here on WUSB, 3:30 kickoff, and we shall bring that to you live at Laval Stadium instead of in the studio, which is going to be a relief for everybody. But
and that's a game too, where that's a game where, and we're going to talk about NFL soon, But that's a game where, like Giants and Washington, that should be penciled in as a win for the Seawolves, because they're facing a Rams offense that averages about 2 touchdowns a game. They've given up, averaging wise, about 6 touchdowns per game. They're 0-3. Over the past couple seasons, it has been all Stony Brook against Fordham. So you don't want to write out a team, but on paper, Stony Brook, especially coming off of that game against Oregon, they should really capitalize on what they learned and show that this is going to be a more refined team against Fordham and carry that momentum into conference play, I believe. If Fordham manages to win, I think there's a lot of questions in terms of who should be leading this team, whether it be quarterbacking or receiving or defensively or even coaching next week.
So, looking forward to it, naturally. And like I said, the history goes back a long way, but we had a 30-year lull where we went from 1988 to 2018 without playing them. But in any case, you got that coming up, and we already talked about the soccer teams, what they have coming up, and volleyball as well. Now we have to deal with the continuation of the New York football malaise era. Malaise era 2, if you lived through the previous one back in the 1970s. The Jets and the Giants. We'll start with Thursday night because we're all communicating with each other via text. And this was a team that the Giants, of course, could always use a win against the Washington football team in their division on the road. And by every indication, a game that was very, very, very winnable. Yes, it wasn't going to be a blowout, but you can argue very strongly that the Giants should have won this game. And one important reason why they did not, and it was decided on one at the end of the game, but it had been influential in the decision on the game prior to it, all through it, the penalties. And that's inexcusable. When penalties do you in like that, and you're playing a team that's pretty much at your level in terms of mediocrity, the most disciplined one ends up winning, and that's pretty much what happened here. 30-29 the final. Okay, I admit that first missed field goal at the end of the game, I texted out, Norwood! Because it reminded me so much of Super Bowl 25. Unfortunately, that's the only thing about this Giant team that reminds me of Super Bowl 25. Go ahead, guys.
Yeah, no, it was, it was weird. It was like you couldn't take your eyes off the game, even though it was not a pretty brand of football, especially if you're a Giants fan. The one thing I came away from the game, other than the fact that it could be a long season for the Giants, is you got to be worried about what you have in Saquon Barkley. He's coming off a bad injury, and in the post-game press conference, he's talking about, he doesn't know if he could trust the knee still. And he really kind of gives reminders of not even obviously to the point of like for a full career, but like a Barry Sanders where he gets a couple yards, like he'll get 1 yard, 2 yards, and then, he'll give you a breakaway kind of run, 40-yard pop. But of late, it's obviously with the injuries and everything, but Barkley hasn't had a lot of those pops. He had that 40-yard run. But other than that, he's not giving you a lot in the offense. And this is a guy that they drafted really high. They're expecting a lot out of, especially this year, to take some pressure off of Daniel Jones. And right now, it doesn't seem like he's that guy. And you might have to pay him at the end of the year.
But here you go again. Paying him at the end of the year is going to depend very heavily on his health. And somebody else might take a risk, but the Giants, I don't think, can afford to at this point. But here's the other thing, too. how much of Saquon Barkley is him and how much is the offensive line? Because that's all we've been talking about these past few weeks. How good can Saquon Barkley be with the Giants' offensive line?
Well, I would say that, you look around the league at some of, maybe the other top backs, namely, I would think a Christian McCaffrey. And yes, he does a lot of damage, in the catching game, receiving game, but Carolina didn't have the best offensive line the last couple of years, and he's still, outside of the injury last year, he's still been putting up big seasons, having, good stats. And even though they haven't been doing a ton of winning down there, he's still, everybody looks to him as probably the top running back in the game, if not, top three.
I gotta say this. There's no doubt Barkley's a subsolar, and again, for an injury of that magnitude, obviously you're going to be. It doesn't matter who you are, But at the same time, just comparing the Panthers and the Giants' offensive lines, and Giants in particular, it's not surprising we're seeing these struggles because there really aren't that many differences between last year's and this year's lines. Maybe the positions changed a bit. People moved to different spots, but it's pretty much the same guys. The one difference would have been Matt Secura, who was signed this past week, which honestly, when you go back to that Broncos game, it surprised me that was the only move that was made. Maybe Gettleman knew in hindsight, hey, I'm going to lose my center in Nick Gates today, so I better sign a backup one now. So in that sense, I guess it paid off. But again, you're looking at an offensive line where you got guys who are young and don't have that much experience, Andrew Thomas. Guys who are playing injured, Shane Lemieux, he's one arm. You have guys, again, like Matt Secura, who are essentially backups or third strings. This isn't a great offensive line to begin with. So it doesn't surprise me we're seeing these struggles, especially from Saquon Barkley. And you put him in an offense that's run by Jason Garrett, where he's either doing two things: halfback dives on second and long or four verts. And he's not even doing that too much. He's doing a lot of inside slants, first downs, third downs, and you pray that your receiver wins the one-on-one battle. So I'm not surprised Barkley's failing because this offense isn't really built around him. In fact, it seems to be built around everyone else on the offense but him, considering how much Kenny Golladay and Sterling Shepard in particular was turned to, as well as Daniel Jones on the ground on the read options.
And with the direction they're heading into, you have to think Gettleman's job is on the line. Potentially Joe Judge's job is on the line. And if they stay at that rate, you're thinking, like Matt said, maybe you don't bring back a Saquon, even though you put all that value in him at the number 2 pick in the draft a couple of years back. And it might be time to just kind of blow this whole thing up.
This is a team that isn't supposed to be in that position, and there's a lot of red flags everywhere. Everywhere I look, past couple of weeks, these were 2 winnable games, and you're facing 2 backup quarterbacks. Taylor Heineke for sure. No disrespect to Teddy Bridgewater, but at most teams he would not be the starter. Okay, he is on this Broncos team because they failed to get Aaron Rodgers, and he was able to outplay his competition, which isn't all that up to snuff anyway. And this Giants team, they just made so many dumb errors. I mean, they had 11 penalties in total, 4 false starts. Obviously, the one at the end with Dexter Lawrence that gave Washington the second chance to win the game. They had a flag where they had to burn a timeout just to get everyone lined up, and then Andrew Thomas immediately jumped off sides. I mean, this team is not playing good football, which is sad considering they scored 29 points on Thursday. And Daniel Jones had, besides his debut, I think the game of his life, considering he didn't turn the ball over once, despite getting battered all over by the Washington defensive line. So hats off to them there. This team is not disciplined, and it showed. This is not a winning football team, and management's got to make a lot of moves now. They should have refined the offensive line. They got to do that, I think, ASAP. Honestly, I want to see them get a pass rusher because this is a team that the defensive line's able to get a couple yards to the quarterback, but no one's able to get the job done. They only have 3 sacks this season. And considering they finished with 40 last year, they're on pace to get 25, which is what, a third of that? It's just unacceptable.
Well, to that point, Ken, they thought the pass rush would be coming from guys like Leonard Williams, who they gave a lot of money to in the offseason, and Ojulari, who they spent an early second-round draft pick on, a guy that they had valued in the first round, and so far, the production hasn't been there. Luckily for them, they have a home game against Atlanta, who doesn't look like they're the cream of the crop, and they have a extra time to prepare after a Thursday night game, so they might have an opportunity to kind of maybe turn it around for at least one game.
Well, that means this is as close to a must-win as you can get in Week 3. Because, as we said, yet another winnable game that the only thing that would prevent the Giants from winning this game would be if they defeated themselves just like they did on Thursday. But if it happens again, we're going to be calling for heads to roll, but you know how it is in football.
I'm already calling for heads to roll.
They don't roll till the end of the season.
And that's the problem, because we're seeing the same problems again and again. This is the 5th straight year this team has fallen 0-2 to start the season. They're just as bad as the Jets.
Like I said, Malaise era.
This is a team, again, we see this stat every week, and it sucks because it's not changing. This team has not seen above 500 football in, I think, 4 seasons. 4 seasons. Like, if you still have the same guy running the ship from 4 seasons ago to now and nothing's changing, I think it's pretty clear that guy needs to go. I'm not talking about the head coach.
You know what I think? They should have somebody, maybe I'll be the first to do it, and maybe others will pick up on this trend. Particularly people, like I've been saying, I told you guys this, people of my generation who went through that first Malaise era always had favorite out-of-town teams. Please, Giants and Jets, we don't want our kids to grow up Tampa Bay fans or Kansas City Chief fans or New England fans. If you really care about your next generation not growing up as fans of out-of-town teams, you'll get your act together.
Yeah, it's a great point. And, going back to the Kenny talking about wanting heads to roll already, you got to figure if they get rid of Gettleman, the next guy who comes in here is going to want his own head coach. He's going to want his own quarterback. And he's probably not going to want to sign a running back who really has been, somewhat disappointing to any kind of contract. You could be talking pretty much starting from scratch in a sense. And on top of that, it's another season where you start out 0-2 and you're looking at the teams ahead of you and, you're already last. You're already at least one game behind. And it's just going to be another season where you're like, all right, well, if we get a win this week and all the other teams lose in the division, then, you don't want to be doing that. And it's already week 2 and Giants fans,
it sure feels that way.
Yeah. You're doing it again for, I think, the 5th year in a row now. So
at least, yeah.
And the Cowboys, they look good. They had they
look so refined. They've lost the first 2 games, but they're probably the best 0-2 team, I think, in the NFL right now.
But they won today.
Oh, I'm sorry, they won today. I'm sorry.
They got
correct myself.
They beat the Chargers
they're probably the best
on the road.
Let me correct myself. Yeah, they're probably the best 1-1 team. There we go. They're probably the best 1-1 team, I think, in the NFL. Because you're right, they lost to the Bucks. It was a tight game going up against the Super Bowl winners, and he played phenomenal. And even
Super
today,
Bowl champion in Week 1, and you're on the national stage. It's the season opener, and you played them tough. But the only thing about the Chargers, though, How much better are they than the Chargers, and they only won by a field goal, not a touchdown, a field goal?
That's true, but considering how bad Dallas was last season, you got to take all the wins you can get. Doesn't matter what the score is, and you at least helped them to 17. It's not like they lost. It's not like it was 36-33, like we saw that Giants game last season. I believe that was the score. It was a low scoring game, yes, but it was still, I thought, a well played game. Prescott he didn't have a touchdown. He had 237 yards passing, though. They established the run game, which I thought was big. And surprisingly, it was Tony Pollard who led in the rushing, getting over 100 yards, averaged about 8 per carry. This is a team that adjusted even after, leading 14-3 in the first quarter, and they were able to get enough. And honestly, I thought Greg Zuerlein bailed out Mike McCarthy. I don't know what he was doing, running the clock all the way to 2 and having your kicker try a 60-yard field goal. But hey, it worked. So, this is a Cowboys team that is going to be atop of this NFC conference.
Here's the thing. Talk about a team that's better in their record. The Chargers, too. This was a pretty good matchup. Well, one difference in the game, obviously, was Greg Zuerlein. Okay, the kicker. Missed 3 attempts last week. Nails a 56-yarder as time expires to pull out the game. So, again, not the first time, won't be the last, that your game hangs on the toe of your kicker. Happened to the Washington football team, right? But in any case, a guy who I think we have to keep our eye on for the rest of the season, second-year quarterback Justin Herbert on L.A., on the Chargers. Because this guy showed people something. He found holes in the defense. He made ridiculous throws the whole game. And he's going to be entertaining. Maybe in the tradition of Charger quarterbacks. The only problem is you don't want to be too much in that tradition because the Chargers, as we know, have never won a Super Bowl. So you don't want to be Dan Fouts. Dan Fouts never got there. Great quarterback, Hall of Famer, but he never got there. You want to go to another level. You don't want to be Archie Manning. You want to be Drew Brees. You know what I mean?
And not only that, but not to take Giants further down, but I'm going to. They're the only team in the NFC East that aren't 1-1, obviously by design for the face conference team, but still, that week 1 loss hurts even more. Consider Eagles won their week 1 game. Cowboys won this week, and obviously Washington pulling off the win. So this Giants team is already a step behind the rest of the competition. That, again, Washington, great defensive line, and are still winning in spite of not really having that established quarterback. Although Heineke, I thought, played really good against a lackluster defensive effort from this Giants team compared to their usual standard last season. The Eagles struggled today, but Jalen Hurts has impressed me through the first couple weeks. And obviously the Cowboys and Dak Prescott, who is living up to his contract, his multi-million-dollar contract he signed over the offseason.
Ken, you make a great point about the Eagles. They've impressed me mightily. I thought they were going to be maybe one of the worst teams in the league, and up until this point, they look like they could win the division. I mean, Jalen Hurts has been, that first week he played out of his mind, and this week he goes up against a really good, San Francisco team who last year dealt with injuries, but they've year after year since Shanahan has really gotten that team established, they've been a winning team, good defenses, and, it was a close game there in Philly today. And I think, they can ride that momentum, even though they got the L, into next week and really have, something to feel good about between Hurts and their rookie wide receiver, Devontae Smith. And that defense, too, is a lot better than I thought it was going to be. You have a great offense in 49ers, and you held them to less yards than you got. You give 300, but you will still max score more. But as you said, holding them to that still, despite giving them more plays, and managing to,
apply pressure to Garoppolo. They still lost the game 17-11, but it was close and literally came down to the last quarter for really both teams to find its way to the end zone. Jake.
Yeah, definitely. And I think people kind of discounted this Eagles offensive line, thinking that, they were getting older, but it looks like they might have another year or two in them with some of these veteran guys to give Hurts, an opportunity to really show his talent and really to be another team to be in the thorn of the sides of the Giants as you look above you in the standings.
Hey, it feels that way. And too, in spite, it looks like they lost Brandon Graham, a tackle on the offensive line for the rest of the season, Achilles injury. But at the same time, for the first couple weeks, Hurts has impressed me. Yeah, he had 190 yards today, but he's in his second season, really his first full season starting, and I thought played well, really better on the ground, as good on the ground as he was passing. Still managed to get about 8 yards per carry in his 10 carries, and he's been, I think, really stepping up this receiving core, which on paper it doesn't look all that impressive. But through the first couple of games, they have definitely, I thought, played more higher than anticipated. Devontae Smith obviously didn't get too involved today. Zach Ertz as well. They really turned to Quez Watkins, who had really most of the passing offense, 117 yards in his 2 catches, as well as Dallas Goedert, who usually is going to be, TE1 for the moment and their primary or secondary receiver. So Eagles and Cowboys going to face each other next Monday, which is going to be pretty fun. Some Monday Night Football there. It's good. It's going to be intense for sure. But at the same time, it doesn't bode well for the Giants that the other 3 teams in the conference are definitely, I think, a gear up on them. And they need everyone they can get, obviously. But especially now when you're already behind in conference play. So they got to make a lot of changes, a lot of changes fast on both ends of the ball.
Okay. Now we have to turn to the other team, the New York Jets. Well, I'm not going to, might as well start with the same old Jets. But seriously, though, you have their version of Zach Wilson, and looking back, would our version of Zach Wilson have thrown 4 interceptions, Zach?
I'm sorry. What was that you were saying again?
You wouldn't have thrown 4 interceptions today, would you? But
I'm not sure. I'm not really a football player per se.
But yeah, well, we're just wondering if this Zach Wilson is either. Seriously, though, going up against the New England Patriots and opportunity knocked because this Patriots team is a little bit more down to earth than from when they had Tom Brady. And I think most importantly, that a win here would take a lot of pressure off the Jets because look, expectations aren't very high, but it would definitely be, I guess, less of a burden with a win under your belt, especially against a team that's supposed to be significantly better than you. But the problem was, in this case, turnovers. And Patriots prevailed 25-6.
Matt, it was pretty much as bad as it could get for Zach Wilson today. You come off the second half last week in Carolina, and as a Jets fan, I know I felt like he had a little momentum going, and you see the bright spots this kid can have, and the game starts off, you force New England a punt. And for the first time, it seemed like all season, the first play from scrimmage, the Jets run the ball for 8 yards. And you start to be like, okay, maybe we could do something. It's one play, but it's probably like one of the biggest runs all season. And then the next play, pass is tipped, intercepted, and you already see the nightmare starting, because it's another instance where the Patriots are in your home building. You see an interception, a young quarterback, Bill Belichick on the other side of the field, and you know what can be coming for the rest of the game. And today is exactly what that was. They come out, they hold them to a field goal after that, and then Jets get the ball back, another big play run, and Wilson, his second throw of the game, picked off again. And it was just that's literally what the story was the whole game.
But here's the thing. Interceptions, and we talked about this in previous weeks, because Eli Manning was notorious for this. Tipped balls, dropped balls, ending up in the hands of somebody else, and officially counted as an interception because somebody on the other team caught it, despite the fact that somebody on your team touched it. They need to come up with a new stat for that. But what happened was, in this case, in the first case, J.C. Jackson caught a tip pass, and Corey Davis dropped the ball, and that let the ball fall in the lap of Adrian Phillips. But both situations, the Patriots got 10 points out of the deal. So there you go. And when you make a mistake against a Bill Belichick coach team, you will pay. And that's exactly what they did. They feasted on a rookie quarterback, and they sacked him 4 times. Josh, how do you spell Uchi? Had a pair of sacks. 4 takeaway game with quarterbacks Jackson Phillips and Devin McCourty making the big plays. Okay. Mac Jones at quarterback wasn't asked to do much, but there you go. A Belichick coach team. He sets you up for success. And all you had to do to win this game, because the defense played so well and took the Jets out of their game so easily, was not make any mistakes. And he didn't.
Well, that was the thing that killed me, too, was, as a Jets fan, you're watching the game. Wilson throws the 2 interceptions. The Patriots go up by 10, and then the Jets come down. They get a field goal, and you hold, you force the Patriots 3 and out right after that. It's a 7-point game. You get the ball back before half. And then Wilson just throws another interception. I think it was probably the worst one of the day, too. Just kind of threw it in really no man's land. And as a Jets fan, you've seen that too many times. You're ready to turn the game off, even though it's still a 1-score game.
Times. Yeah, to me, just seeing Wilson performance, he just lost. To me, he lost confidence as the game went on. As the first, or maybe the second one, you could say, yeah, it was tipped off. But those third and fourth interceptions were ugly, and we've seen it time to time, especially near Jets football in the past few years. But they were direct throws straight into the hands of the Patriot defenders. I think J.C. Jackson, I think it was third one or fourth one, it was thrown right to him. Barrios was nowhere near, the ball. It was bad. And you're right, big part of the reason why it's so bad is because you're going up against Bill Belichick, who knows this Jets team knows pretty much every team, but the Jets especially better than they know themselves. And another thing, too, is I think we're just seeing who the Jets truly are. And not that we had necessarily high hopes for them at the start of the season anyway, but, Wilson's only as good as the team around him. And this team cannot compare to a Patriots team that looks refined all over. Jones has good tour again, running as well. For the Jets, they looked best on offense when it was on the ground. They had 4 ball carriers with Coleman, Johnson, Carter, and Wilson. Yards. Run game. But, when it came time for passing, the Patriots were ball hawks all over the field. It was pretty. Wilson did not have roles, which sucks because that was his bread and butter in college, and he. I don't think he's ready to complete a lot of throws, especially deep like that. He's really, I think, on the short on the run for this just to fall.
Well, that's the thing that kills me too, Ken, is we see what the Jets did over the offseason and even going back since Joe Douglas got here, trying to bring in some kind of weapons for this offense. And you sign a Corey Davis, you sign a Keelan Cole, you draft an Elijah Moore, you draft a Michael Carter, and you drafted Denzel Mims. He's a scratch. He's a healthy scratch. And I know some of other Jets fans were scratching our head because he gets limited snaps against Carolina, and one of his 3 snaps, he's got a 20-yard catch down the field for Wilson. And it's like, what, we see these plays from him here and there in his limited role, and we're wondering why he doesn't get more time when we see some of these other guys not producing. Keelan Cole, I barely even knew he was in the game today. Elijah Moore at least made an appearance, but last game he was nowhere to be found. And obviously coming in for the game plan, Belichick is going to try to, send all his attention at Corey Davis.
Yeah. And again, just looking at these two teams, the difference I think between Jones and Wilson today is that the Patriots offense, they built up their attack. They did a lot of dink and dunk, a lot of short passes, from Jones, his tight ends, his receivers, to really, build up, I think, that confidence and get the momentum swinging for Mac. When he was able to have a pretty successful day, finish with 22 completions, 186 yards, even though he didn't throw a touchdown, he was still throwing 73% on the day. For Wilson, literally was a 15, 20, 25-yard crossfield dot, going his left to his right, and it found its way into the hands of a defender. I was too early to prepare for it, and also long shots is on because they got very talented backs. And for as well, someone who's in your second game, unless you're Patrick Mahomes, there's no reason you got to take a shot every pass, which is what it really felt like watching Wilson throw the ball for much of the game today. It really wasn't until the end when the game was blown out of proportion he started to, find himself because he was making easy passes, short passes.
It was so frustrating watching on the replays. You see guys in the flat, they're open and he's either not seeing them or he hits them late and it doesn't give them up. They have green grass ahead of them. If he hits them early enough, maybe not for 20-yard plays, but you're talking 8-yard plays and he's hitting them late. They're going, they have no choice but to go out of bounds after the catch, or he's not hitting them at all. And it turns into turnovers.
Yeah. And again, this really shouldn't be this Jets team. I know folks wanted them to be a 10-win team. It's just, to me at least, they don't have the tools to do that. As good as Wilson could be, just the team surrounding him, the offensive line as well, which on path to launch played better in the second half, but have the tools to get it done and win those amount of games yet. And I think again the potential is there for sure. Mike Anderson is not on the call today. He's not a happy camper. He really has little to no faith in Zach Wilson's quarterback abilities. And I think it's way too early, still too early, to write him out yet. And a lot of folks on Twitter, him included, were saying, hey, if we had Darnold, we'd never be in this position. And again, I just want to counter with, look at Darnold. He has much better offensive line. He has better receiving players he can throw it to. He has Christian McCaffrey, who alone makes up 2/3 of that offense. So obviously he's going to look a lot better by default compared to what the Jets have. This is still the youngest team in the league, and there's going to be a lot of growing pains. And you just got to accept that and learn from these games. So the next time you face New England, you realize, hey, let's not try to throw it 35 yards into double coverage. Let's try to get some of those shorter passes. Let's use the flat. Let's use those short routes, those out routes, those hitch routes to get you up to speed, get you 4, 5, 6 straight passes, get you in momentum to where you can find your way to the end zone, which New York failed to do earlier today.
Well, and that's the other thing too is, you said this team is super young. The defense is super young, and they lose probably one of their best players on the defensive side of the ball before the year even started when Carl Lawson tore his Achilles. And, the defense is not playing bad at all. They get put in these tough situations off the turnovers, and they've really been a pretty good defense, all things considered. I mean, New England only rushed for 100 yards, barely 100 yards on the day. Mac Jones only threw for, 186. It's not like New England's offense was really steamrolling them. They had better field position to start. The Jets' turnovers really killed them. And if you were to say at all that a reason why they hung in this game, it was because of the defense.
Yeah, they kept it close for a lot of the first half. Again, heading into the locker room, there was still a shot for the Jets because, the defense was able to hold on and only give up maybe 3 points a drive. It was 13-3, and the 13 didn't come until the last play of the first half. So it was a one-score game for a lot of the first half. You're kind of just waiting for the offense to step up and match the Patriots' production, and it just never came. And that's one of the reasons why defense gave up 9 points that third quarter, and then 3 afterwards, but didn't give up a touchdown after the opening quarter play. So they definitely, I think, played better than the numbers are going to show. But again, it's really up to the offense now to step up, and they're going to have to against a Broncos team next Sunday at 4:00, because the Broncos have definitely, I thought, stepped up. Obviously, beating the Giants, beating the Jaguars as well. So you beat 2 lackluster teams, and you have another one in front of you with the Jets in terms of how they played so far. And the Broncos obviously have a great defensive line. We saw that last week. A good secondary as well that caused issues for Trevor Lawrence this week and Daniel Jones last week. So, Wilson's going to have to put what he learned today to test next week in order to defeat Denver.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about this game, and kind of goes across the league, is just you saw again how good these Alabama running backs are when they come into the NFL. Damian Harris had one of the runs of the year probably when I think he made 5 or 6 Jets tacklers miss. You saw in Pittsburgh, Najee Harris with a crazy stiff arm. And then King Henry was at it again in Seattle with just a monster game. And it makes me wonder, seeing, the Jets' offensive struggles, and, Wilson could use maybe a McCaffrey of his own. Maybe that's something they look to do. Fast forward to the next draft, try to give him a nice safety blanket in the backfield.
Well, it didn't take a lot of losing, which sadly the Jets have a lot of experience with past couple seasons. But no, I agree. When you just compare Darnold's situation last year and now, it's the difference. He has tools. He has weapons he can turn to. Last year was probably the time offense. He had an offensive Jets have a star, which I agree is an issue. But on the ground, at least, these past weeks, they've shown they can move the ball forward more often than not on the ground. The problem is translating that really, they get really it's what's been eluding in the past several years. At that superstar on the offense and that one guy who can really be in control of the game. They were hoping they got in Wilson, but again, unless you're Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, like we're going to talk about now, you can't really trust these young guys to be that X factor. But no, speaking of Jackson and Mahomes, what a Sunday night football game we just witnessed. I know you're all probably watching along with me, but what an incredible upset. I don't know, Zach's eager to talk about this one, but the Ravens
on this one.
Yeah, pulling the upset off against Kansas City. It was funny because on the pregame show on NBC, only one guy picked the Ravens. That was Mike Tirico. And I felt kind of sad because internally I said, Mike is a very smart man, smart analyst. I don't know why he picked the Ravens over the Chiefs. And sure enough, the Ravens pulled off an incredible win. And Lamar Jackson's kryptonite, at least for tonight, no more, 36-35, and nail-biter to the very end.
Patrick Mahomes got intercepted as he was being tackled, and that was his first career interception in the month of September. And everybody knows Patrick Mahomes is unstoppable in September. So this is more than just a mere upset. This is huge.
Not only is it huge, but I think a lot of people just lost a lot of money.
Oh, God, yeah.
For sure. It was an incredible game.
A game like this, first of all, there wasn't much of a spread. What kind of odds? Because the one thing that might save you is that you probably don't put a lot of money on something that's not going to give you a big payoff. But depends on what you bet on. And
I mean, it was overall.
If you
was
bet on
City
Patrick Mahomes throwing an interception today, you cleaned up.
Yeah.
Agreed. That's really what it took to win. That fourth quarter, I thought, was the momentum changer for this game because the Chiefs led up till that point throughout the entirety of the contest. But that fourth quarter, they got outclassed by Harbaugh and his defense. But obviously, the offense getting done on the ground as well. I mean, an incredible game. Lamar Jackson, overall, running and passing, finished with 346 yards. I mean, he was a one-man wrecking crew today. Absolutely incredible.
I'm looking at the highlights right now, and it looked like a perfect Baltimore Ravens game. And I'm sure Jim Furchland is going to text somebody because he's a huge Ravens fan. This is the type of game you want your Ravens team to turn in every week. And if they do that, they'll be fine. And again, beating them 36-35. But here you go. It's most games with 200 pass yards and 100 rushing yards. Lamar Jackson with 4, Russell Wilson with 3, Cam Newton with 3. And when Lamar Jackson does throw for 200 and rush for 100, he's 4-0.
Yeah, this might have been his career game. He was phenomenal at the time. Took a bit for the offense to catch up. Jackson did have the first half, but he really stepped up after that. And really, Baltimore dominated on the ground. Besides Jackson, they combined for 250 yards. They only gave up 62 to Kansas. So when Kansas City tried to get the run game going at the end, it forced that key fumble that ultimately gave the Ravens the game-winning drive.
That's D for you. When your D's clicking like that, okay, yeah, try running it. Yeah, you couldn't run against this all day. We're going to make it cost you. You get the ball stripped away, and rest is history.
And the Ravens defense definitely played a big part. Okay, number one, it helped allow the Ravens to dominate time of possession, 36 minutes to about 23. But number two, it goes to third down. Okay, the Ravens were able to capitalize on 6 of their 11 third downs and convert them. They held Kansas City to 1 of 6 on the evening. All right, that's the difference maker. Not only taking the ball out of Mahomes' hands, but that explosive offense in general that still managed to score 35
1
points.
of 6 on third down conversions, and they still scored 35 points.
Yeah, this is not an offense to sleep on, obviously.
This also tells you something else. As great as the Ravens defense played on the forced turnovers and all that, they still gave up 35 points. That tells you that they had to give Kansas City everything they had in order to get by them.
And they did.
This was a game where both teams left it out on the field. Now, here we are in what-if territory. What if these two teams met in the playoffs later in the year?
Oh, it's Jake.
Well, I was going to say, if that does happen, you probably like to think that Kansas City's going to have home field in that game, and that could be, that could change the game a little bit. But going back to the Baltimore defense, you got to look coming off last week. They kind of got somewhat embarrassed for what they're used to in Las Vegas, especially, you figure coming home, that might give them a little bit of a benefit, but going up against Patrick Mahomes is probably the hardest thing you got to do in the NFL, except maybe Tom Brady, who seems to be aging like fine wine. But they have a lot of injuries in that secondary, especially at the cornerback position. And it's just surprising to look. Yeah, Travis Kelce had a normal day for him, over 100 yards and a touchdown. But you see Tyreek Hill, only 3 receptions for 14 yards. They were able to do something to limit some of these big game breakers for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, that's called double team and blitz. They did not allow any breathing room for Tyreek Hill in particular. They really forced Mahomes to rely a lot on Travis Kelce, which he did. Still was able to get 100 yards for Kelce and touchdown. But yeah, Tyreek Hill was the difference maker. They smothered him all game. And then just the blitz in general to get Mahomes uncomfortable as he could be. Still threw for 300 plus yards, 343 yards. So it didn't matter much until the very end where he threw that interception while getting sacked. If there's any fault you can say for Mahomes, it's that when he's getting sacked, trying to get rid of the ball usually never leads to anything good, no matter who you are.
And another thing you got to look at too was the running back for the Ravens, Tyson Williams, the rookie out of BYU. He came out of camp, supposed to be the third string, and 2 key injuries at the position for the Ravens, and he kind of is forced into the starting position, and he comes out against the winners of the AFC last season and has 13 carries for 77 yards. Obviously, Lamar Jackson led the team in rushing, but that's nothing to sneeze at either for a rookie.
Oh yes, yeah, I was still averaging about 6 yards a carry, and it makes this already dangerous run even scarier because you got Lamar Jackson. Tyson Williams delivered a performance of a lifetime today, but Latavius Murray coming in still managed to get 36 yards on 9 carries, and even Devontae Freeman, he only ran the ball twice, but he still managed to get 30 yards on his evening. So you're looking at 4 pretty good running backs this Ravens offense can turn to, as well as including the superstar that is Lamar Jackson. So this Ravens team is going to be fun to watch for sure. Kansas City, they're going to learn, they're going to improve from this loss. And, unfortunately for the facing next, it's probably not going to be a pretty game. That, of course, is going to be the Chargers. But it is absolutely incredible. And upset I really did not see coming. For Kansas City, a team that rarely, if ever, loses in September with Patrick Mahomes as the QB.
And it really is reminiscent of Lamar Jackson's time in college at Louisville with how much, success he had on the ground today. He has the 2 interceptions early, but like you said, he really bounced back. And after that, he played a crisp, clean game. And like you said, it was really one of the, probably for his career. He finally beats Mahomes. And we'll see, like Matt said, maybe they meet again in the playoffs, and maybe it's his chance to, punch the ticket to the Super Bowl.
It will be interesting. Well, coming up for the Jets, of course, they have the Denver Broncos in Week 3. That will be the late game next Sunday. And the New York Giants, they will continue with their schedule on Week 3, 1 o'clock at MetLife Stadium against the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, final 15 minutes of the show. We got to talk about them, but it's been a rough weekend for both teams, the Mets and the Yankees. The Yankees have dropped out of a playoff spot probably by the largest margin in months. And they are a game and a half out right now because Cleveland kicked their butts. And I'll tell you something. When the Cleveland Indians become the Cleveland Guardians next year, they're going to be rather formidable in the Central Division simply because they can pitch. And anything they can't do, they can trade away pitchers to get. When they become the Cleveland Guardians, people are going to say it was the curse of the nickname. All of a sudden they get good because they changed their name. But next year, this team is going to be dangerous because of what they showed us in New York this weekend. The 2 wins against the Yankees out of the 3, double digits, double in runs, and the pitching impeccable. And little too late for them now. They have a record similar to the Mets. They were very much in the race in the Central until Chicago pulled away, and they started pulling a decline similar to the Mets. So this team's got an upside. Yankees, on the other hand, which side is up? I mean, they have become, first of all, they even admit they're the streakiest team in baseball. And you take a look at their record. Just take the 13-game winning streak, when they burst out of the All-Star break,
they follow that up going
over everybody.
Yeah, they follow that up going 7-15.
Now, here we go. The Toronto Blue Jays, who were going nowhere until late August. The Toronto Blue Jays are having a San Francisco Giant type season. And the San Francisco Giants are having a 1998 Yankee type season. They have been dominant from wire to wire. They've run away with everything. San Francisco Giant teams that won the 3 championships, well, they didn't do that. They basically slept through the first 2/3 of the season, which is pretty much what the Blue Jays did. Actually, I take that back. They were scoring runs all year long. The turnaround for the Toronto Blue Jays is that they started to pitch. And they started to give up fewer runs, which meant that offensive juggernaut ended up winning more games. So that's where you are right now.
And one factor for sure is acquiring Jose Barrios during mid-season. He has played tremendously for Toronto in his time there. And just today, he was able to defeat Minnesota, get a 5-3 win, and help the Blue Jays win their 15th in their last 18 overall games. I mean, they have, pitching-wise, they have played phenomenally. And when you have a slugger, an all-time slugger, a potential Triple Crown winner in Vlad Guerrero Jr. on your lineup, your team is going to be able to score runs.
Well, that's the thing. Toronto's been scoring runs like nobody's business. And the Rays can score runs. And the Yankees uncharacteristically can't score runs. Not at the rate that they have previously. And the most frustrating thing of all is that this drought has occurred with basically the same personnel. We talk about the Islanders, for example, in hockey, going from worst defensive team to best defensive team in the NHL with basically the same people, which obviously means it's coaching. Well, this Yankee team has gone from one of the best offensive teams to a very mediocre offensive team with the same people. And, people all over the place are looking for someone to blame.
Yeah, and just to your point, right now in terms of batting, when you look in terms of teams that run sport, Tampa, Toronto, and Boston are in the top 5 of the MLB for this season. The Yankees are all the way down in 18th. They cannot get the job done. And it is embarrassing. Honestly,
the Yankees have had better pitching than they've had in a while. This goes back to the Yankee teams of the 70s were kind of exceptions to that 5-run rule. Average 5 runs a game, the Yankees finish first or second almost invariably. 76 team finished 10, won the American League East by over 10 games. They beat the Royals and they got swept by the Reds, Big Red Machine. But they had good hitters, but they didn't score runs at the rate, and nobody did. That was more of a pitching-oriented era. But those teams in the 90s, they were among the league leaders always in scoring runs. Actually, their pitching was usually mid-pack. Again, you're thinking of, hey, they had David Wells, they had David Cohn, they had Roger Clemens, they had this, they had that. There were teams that pitched better than they did, but nobody hit better, except maybe the Red Sox. When that started to change, when the Red Sox pitching started to get a little bit better, their hitting was always there, then the Red Sox started winning. And now you're seeing the same thing happen with the Toronto Blue Jays. Offensive juggernaut, pitching was super suspect. If it ever happens to the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, that's the way it's going to happen. But unfortunately, Shohei Ohtani is not the answer to your pitching woes. Until he becomes, you know what? Look, it's a great spectacle. It gets national attention. It puts people in the seats to an extent. Winning puts in far more. But Shohei Ohtani, I know I'm digressing, but Shohei Ohtani will help you win only if he's either a pitcher or a hitter, and more likely a hitter. The Yankees and the Red Sox, even before them, learned their lesson. Babe Ruth was a damn good pitcher, but a way better hitter.
Yeah, I think Ohtani's still pretty good as a pitcher. It's just there's no one outside of Ohtani that can get it done, which is bad.
But the problem is that you can't depend on him to be the anchor of a starting rotation because you never know when he's going to pitch next. Overstressing him the way they have. He's had injuries. He can hit hurt. He can DH. Slightest thing wrong with him, though, he can't pitch.
I won't say that he can't pitch, but you're right. He can't pitch consistently because, again, dealing with stuff like arm soreness, which he's at. That's fair, but yeah, the Angels, that's definitely been their biggest problem. Is outside of Ohtani, the rotation has been ugly. And heck, it's hurting other teams as well. When you look at a former Angel in Andrew Heaney on the Yankees, where it seems every time he steps on the mound, the ball's going out the park 2 pitches later. Their pitching just flat out sucks. And it's incredible they got 72 wins with, everyone outside of Shohei Ohtani performances on the mound.
But that's a problem, too, because Shohei Ohtani, as much as I respect his ability as an athlete and as a baseball player, he's a sideshow. And sideshows don't win for you. And
I think he's a sideshow in the sense that there's not a lot of help outside of him. Trout's been hurt. Rendon's been hurt. things missing the rest of the season for sure. So it's tough.
Yeah,
You know,
but
he can't
even
do
with
it on
those
his own.
guys, with no pitching, all they're going to do is do what the Blue Jays did until about a few weeks ago.
And just talking about both New York teams in general, it has been awful, you know, in terms of really everything, but especially I think pitching. You know, the Mets losing their last 5 of 6 and really underperforming, especially pitching wise. You know, this is a team. Their ERA this week was at a 6. That was the 5th worst ERA in the league, and they've surrendered so many hits, doubles especially, and runs. You know, opposing batters are just feasting off of this pitching.
I think you can say the Mets have faded. The Mets are
The
pretty
magic
much
number
out
is
of
5. The magic number is 5. So they're able to somehow
tragic number, you mean?
go on. Yes, tragic number is 5. So they're able to go on a 6-game win streak. Maybe there's hope, but
Well,
I just don't see it. These guys.
It's happened
And,
40 years ago, nearly 50 actually. But
I don't know. No
I don't see it
DeGrom, Syndergaard, they pushed him back for another week, so who knows if he's even going to come back.
Syndergaard's not coming back.
They played well today against the Phillies, but, you know, really, what good does that do you? You know, you won one game this week out of 6.
The Phillies, they're not that much better than the Mets. As a matter of fact, on paper, they're not better than the Mets at all. But just a couple of breaks have gone their way. And now they're knocking on Atlanta's door. And it's always been the case all year long that you have a better chance of winning the division than you do the wild card, at least if you're in the National League East. And Atlanta's a flawed team, too.
Oh, they all are. I don't see any of these NL East teams making it out of the wild card or first round.
No, I mean, it's going to be owned pretty much by the West. Whoever comes out of the West, and I say whoever comes out, not necessarily the division winner, not necessarily the San Francisco Giants. It could be the Dodgers again. It could be the Padres. It could be...
Maybe not. They've been falling apart, too, just as well. They've gone 2-8 their last 10.
Yeah, now they're having fights in the dugout. But Shea Hillenbrand, who's a Facebook mutual friend, said this happens much more often than you think. The problem is they usually keep it in the clubhouse. I mean, players argue all the time. But the whole idea is what happens in the clubhouse stays in the clubhouse. But that's the case in any sport, on any level. Okay, if you played, you settle your issues within the 4 walls, but you don't let it get out. But every now and then, that doesn't bother me. It shows me that these guys care what's going on. It's when they're just sitting around the dugout half asleep. Then you realize they're just playing out the string. The Yankees are definitely not. The Mets, I think, are at the point where they pretty much are. And that
feels 50-50. It depends on the day. I agree. With this team, should have been a playoff. Again, I said it last week, I got to repeat it again. Whichever team, and if it's both teams, misses playoffs, everyone's got to go. From the players to the managers especially. And then you look at the GMs and you ask yourself, does Cashman really deserve to be here? You know, does Alderson really deserve to be here? And allegedly, Cohen wants to retain Alderson, just move him to a different spot. But I mean, in terms of running the team's operations, I don't know. To me, it's time to move on from both of these guys. It's just not working. Even when they make playoffs, in the Yankees' case, you're not getting past the first or second round. You know, it's time to change.
With that, Zach officially announced the football game on Saturday.
Yep, the Stony Brook Seawolves football team renewing their rivalry with the Fordham Rams after they haven't played each other in 2 years. And once again, we have noticed that this rivalry just getting renewed back in 2018 after they have not played each other since before either one of them went into Division I. So seeing how this is once again going to be recurring annually, this will be a fun rivalry right near the metropolitan area once more.
And you also get to meet the guys from